Oh good, you brought lunch. I was starting to get hungry. Bro, do you ever stop thinking about food? It's not a lunchbox, it's a PC case for our new ITX build. I don't think we've done a small form factor build on this channel yet. Let's dive in and jump into what parts we're gonna be using. So for the case, I'm gonna be using the Lee & Lee and Dan Case's H2O, and this is a collaboration between the both of them, and I picked this for a couple of reasons. The first one being its really small footprint, and then the second reason I picked it is because the IO is actually on this side. So where it's gonna end up, this side of the case is gonna be facing me, so I'm gonna have easy access to the power button and all of the IO. And even though this case is on the smaller side, you can fit some pretty big hardware in it. So let's go ahead and take off the panels and talk about the inside. So our ITX motherboard is gonna be sitting right over here, and then we have an SFX power supply, and that's gonna be sitting right behind this bracket right here. And even though this case is smaller, we can actually fit a 240 millimeter radiator in it, which is awesome because I'm gonna be using a pretty powerful CPU. So the pump is gonna be sitting right here on the CPU, and then I'm gonna have the tubes routed right here and then going to the top. And our radiator is gonna be sitting right here, and then our 120 millimeter fans are gonna be sitting right here. And then you can kind of see where everything will bolt up for our radiator. And then if we also take a look at this side, we can see we have a riser cable. So this riser cable will plug into our motherboard. And then when we take a look at the back, we've got all of my cables going crazy. So here's all of our front panel cable connectors. So we've got like our HD audio, we've got our USB-C, and then we've got our USB-A, but let's put those to the side. And you can see the riser cable comes up right here, and the GPU actually plugs in right here. So it actually plugs in upside down. Then if we take a look at the rear, we can actually fit up to a 3-slot card in this little case, which is crazy. And I'm gonna be using a 2-fan card, which you'll see in a little bit, but it looks like there's a decent amount of room to fit a pretty big card because this whole back section is pretty much dedicated for just the GPU. Then you also saw on the back that there is a little plug right here, and that's because we're gonna route this cable over towards the power supply. So our power supply power cable will actually plug into right here. So it's gonna be a really interesting build, but let's move on to the rest of the components before jumping into the case. So for our motherboard, we're gonna be going with the Asus ROG Strix B850i gaming Wi-Fi, and this is a really nice little board that I'm excited to use, and it's gonna be perfect for our CPU. We've got some really nice VRM cooling. We've also got a really nice M.2 heatsink here, and I think this board is just gonna be a perfect fit for exactly what I'm gonna be using this machine for. For our CPU, we're still gonna be going with one of the best gaming CPUs on the market, and this is the 7800X3D, and this machine is mainly gonna be used for gaming, so the CPU is gonna be absolutely perfect. For RAM, we've got Team Group T-Create RAM, and I love this RAM. This is 32 gigabytes, and it's CL30, so it's very fast DDR5 RAM, and it's also really short, so I shouldn't have to worry about any clearance issues with either this RAM, and it's just really clean, and it actually comes in at a really good price, and it's actually my go-to RAM for a lot of builds I do. So for storage, I've got a 2 terabyte Kingston Fury NVMe, and this is Gen 4, and this will be perfect for all of the games that I'm gonna be loading on it, and it'll be plenty fast. I probably could have gone Gen 5, but I actually already had this on hand, so this is what we're gonna be going with. And like I said earlier, we can fit a 240 millimeter radiator in this thing, so I'm going with the Montech Hyperflow Silent 240, which is really simple, really clean. There's no RGB. We just have the 2 fans that I'll need to power, and then also the plug for the pump. And it's just really clean, and it also comes in at a really good price. So I felt like this was the perfect fit for it. So for our power supply, we're gonna be going with the Corsair SF850, and it's ATX 3.1, which is absolutely awesome. And it's also platinum rated, which makes it even better. And then every time I see an SFX PSU, it always makes me crack up because look how tiny this little guy is. But at the same time, this little tiny guy is also capable of putting out 850 watts. So this is going to be the power supply that I decided to go with for this build. And lastly, for our graphics card, we've got a 2-fan MSI Ventus 4070 Ti Super, and this is 16 gigabytes of VRAM. And one reason I was excited for the ATX 3.1 PSU is because this does have the 12 volt 2x6 connector, so I'll definitely be utilizing the dedicated cable that comes with that PSU, but this is a really small GPU that's capable of putting out some pretty big performance considering how small it is, and it fits absolutely perfect within the H2O chassis. I think it's time to jump into the build. Ladies and gentlemen, the build is all done, and this is such a cool little PC case. And if you've seen any videos on my channel before, you know that this little rotating platform I use pretty much takes up an entire PC case, but look how much extra room I have. This thing is absolutely tiny, and I do use a pretty wide angle lens, so it's gonna make it look bigger than it actually is, but this thing is absolutely tiny, especially when you compare it to my main rig, which is the O11 Vision Compact. But super cool, super sleek looking, just all black, and of course I don't have any RGB, and it's just a really cool little machine. You can see the GPU through the back, but where this is going to be positioned, we're actually not even going to see this side, but that's still pretty cool. And you can see the GPU is going to get a ton of fresh air from these vents over here, and then the power supply gets fresh air through here, and then our radiator is going to exhaust air through the top. So super cool looking build, but let's take off the panels and start talking about the build process and everything else. So here's how the build looks with all the panels off, and I'm really happy with how tidy it is. And I know all the panels are pretty much going to hide all the work that I put into it, but I'm still pretty happy with how this turned out. So let's go ahead and talk about how a few things are routed in this build. So for the pump, the only way I found that it works is if the tubes come out the left side, and you can see they go up right here, they go behind the power supply bracket, and they come down and they go over to the radiator. And I am using one zip tie right here. And the main reason I did that was to create some tension on these radiator tubes, because if we look at the side, you can see they poke out just a little bit, but there is some flexibility with these tubes. So as soon as the panel gets put on, these tubes kind of get pushed in a little bit, and the panel fits with no issues. We've got our 24-pin cable right here. We've got all of our front panel cable connectors kind of right below it, and those are nice and hidden, and all the slack is kind of behind this bracket right here. Then we can also see our CPU cable going over the RAM right there, and then plugged into the top left section of the motherboard. Then our GPU cable is mainly pushed back in here, but you can see it comes down and then it plugs into the GPU right there. Then our GPU secured into the riser cable, and you can see that little tan piece right there that actually locks the GPU into place into the riser cable. And then of course we have these two screws right here holding the GPU in. So the GPU is very, very secure. So this is definitely a transportable build. And given its size, this would definitely be something that you can kind of take with you, take to LAN parties or, you know, wherever you may be taking it. So pretty easy to route things, but let's talk about the actual build process. So ITX builds can definitely be a little bit more difficult than ATX or MATX because you got to be very careful with how you route things. And there's obviously not a ton of room, but I feel if you follow the case manual, then this build is not too bad because there's definitely specific steps you have to take in a certain order to make this build work. Because if you were following the montage, I started with the radiator first, then I kind of had the pump over here to the side. Then we installed our motherboard, and then I installed the pump, and then I was able to install the power supply. And then once the power supply was in, I was able to kind of route all of my cables. So just make sure you follow the manual, then this build is not too bad at all. And I did make a few mistakes in my build process. I did forget to plug in my radiator fans. So I did have to take out my CPU cable at the end and kind of push these tubes downward to be able to get to the top of the motherboard and plug those in. And then I also forgot to plug in my power supply cables when I installed the power supply. So I had to take the PSU back out, plug in all the cables, and then route them, because once the PSU's in, you are not going to be able to get those PSU cables in. So just make sure you do that, unlike I did. And honestly, this build was not too bad. For a first-time builder, it may be a little bit tricky, but just make sure you take your time, and I don't think you'll run into any issues. So yeah, the build process, not bad at all. Limited on room, but at the same time, there also is still a ton of room. Like I have all this room right here if I had any excess cables, but I do not, and it just came out looking really clean. So let's go ahead and talk about the thermals in this case, because I know I'm gonna get a ton of questions on it. So the PC is all hooked up and we're running a Cinebench R23 multi-core test, and I've been running it for about 9 minutes now, and you can see we've got 100% load on the CPU, and the max temperature we actually saw was 83 degrees Celsius. And considering throttle is 95 degrees Celsius and this build only has 2 fans in it, I'm more than happy with the results for this, because while in game, the CPU only gets up to around 70 degrees Celsius and it kind of stays in the high 60s. So under a synthetic benchmark, I'm really happy with 82, 83 degrees Celsius under 100% load. So pretty surprisingly good for a 7800X3D in this small of a machine. So let's go ahead and move on to the GPU temp. So now we're running the GPU benchmark, and I'm using OCCT to do this, and we're pulling about 285 watts, and our temperature right now, after about 4 minutes into the test, is 75 degrees Celsius. And then considering thermal for this GPU, I believe is around 83 or 84, I'm super happy with 75. And I'm not sure my mic is gonna pick it up, but the GPU fans are definitely going hard right now. They are pretty loud, so I may have to do some fan curve adjustments, but I'm really happy with 75 degrees under a full load and literally pulling 285 watts. So, and right now it's at 76. So CPU and GPU temperatures aren't bad. I am gonna have to deal with a little bit of fan noise here, which I'll deal with a little bit later. But overall, the CPU and GPU temps are fantastic, considering this thing is absolutely tiny. So where are we gonna put this little guy? I'm glad you asked. Why don't you follow me out this way? First, we can say hi to Fred. Hey, buddy. And then we can say hi to Daphne. Hey, girl. She's getting some sun. But the PC is actually out in my living room right now, and it's gonna live down here. And I know it's a bit dark, but it fits perfectly down there, and I may move that shelf up just a little bit so I can get a little bit extra breathing room for the exhaust fans, but the PC is gonna live right there. Here is my little makeshift mouse and keyboard setup. And then right now I'm playing some Horizon Forbidden West. So this is where the setup is gonna live, and this is why I built this, is so I can do some comfortable gaming while out here. And I normally sit on my recliner right there and then prop this right on my lap. And I do want to get something new, so if anyone has any recommendations for a nice flat surface I could use, please feel free to comment that down below. But this is where the setup lives, and this is where I'm going to be using it. Mainly just going to be using it for gaming. So if you don't mind, I think I'm going to get back to my game. But thanks for watching. Like the video, comment what you think, and I'll see y'all in the next video.